Well, hi students. Today I have with me RMIT JD Alumni Sepi Sadri. Sepi is a County Court Judges Associate, and it's great that she's with me today. Hi Sepi.
Hi Rob.
So Sepi, you had a career obviously before you became a Judges Associate. Just give us a bit of your background and how you came into the law.
Yeah, so I started my career at an Australian-owned international investment bank, Macquarie. I commenced there through the graduate program after finishing the Bachelor of Commerce at Melbourne. In my first year there, I quickly learned that I couldn't spend the rest of my working life chasing the bottom line, and so I chose to enrol in law because I knew that law could offer me, would allow me to offer something to give, and without really compromising, what I think is a desperate need to be intellectually engaged with my work. So after I finished my degree, I moved to the West in search of some more meaningful work, and I landed a position. I had the privilege of defending a very marginalised subset of the Victorian taxi industry who were suffering an acute injustice. They had basically lost the rights to earn a living for their families, and they were also being sued under the insurer's right of subrogation. So I was able to assist them with that, and that was and remains thus far the most rewarding part of my career.
And how well did the RMIT JD course prepare you for the real world of the legal profession and the law?
To be prepared for a career in law, you need to have understood a basic grasp of the concepts in the JD itself, and to have understood the concepts taught in the units. The lecturers played, especially at RMIT, I found, they played a really central role in preparing us as students psychologically for the sheer volume of reading that was meant to happen. So that when you are in practice and you've started your career in law and you're sitting there with, as I frequently did during the course of my JD, I sat there with the textbook, the annotated case guide, the legislation and or the rules and regulations, a Latin and English dictionary. You aren't overwhelmed when you have to decipher a piece of legislation as a lawyer, because they prepared you for it really well.
And are there any things, tell the truth now, are there any things that you wish maybe you'd concentrated on a bit more when you're a student, now that you're working in the law?
Absolutely. There's only one answer to that, and that is I wish I'd paid more attention to the invaluable advice of the librarians when they had some legal research lessons for us. And because they were unexaminable, they went basically right off the top of my head. But I can't stress how important it is to be able to find the answer to something that you're looking for quickly and without having to rely on anybody else. And the trick with legal research is to be able to firstly determine the question, and once you have the right question, then to frame that in the right legal research lingo, for instance, that say Jade or LexisNexis interface will recognise. And once you're able to do that, then you're able to get really more specific answers, and the better the question is, the better the answer will be for you as well. And if you're able to do that, then you don't need to rely on anyone else for the answers, and it's very important.
And a Judges Associate. So what is a Judges Associate? What does your role entail, and how did you get the gig?
So a Judges Associate they have tasks in court, so specific tasks that need to be performed in court and also in chambers as well. So in court, you might be responsible for arraigning an accused, which means that you lay out the charges to an offender who has pleaded to a set of charges. You might be reading out a verdict to the accused after a trial, and you need to prepare orders on the spot, and then you have your duties in chambers. In chambers, you might be involved in legal research, you might be involved in drafting sentences or judgments, and or you might be just involved in getting a cup of tea for the judge. It really depends on the demands of the specific judge that you have. And that's basically the role of a judge's associate.
And how do you get a job like that?
Well, you apply. Generally they look for young lawyers, and often lawyers with some community legal centre experience as well. But having said that, there are lots of law graduates and who aren't admitted yet, and people in their penultimate and final year of law degrees who are also judges associates. So if you have the intention of perhaps joining the bar one day, it's a good option, and they tend to sort of attract those type of applicants.
Okay, so let's say there are some students who are watching this who might want to go to the bar one day. What has this job that you have as a judge's associate taught you about preparation and about advocacy more generally?
Preparation and in fact primacy are key. So if your preparation means not leaving the judge with any residual question marks. So if you can go into court and you know you've covered all your bases, and the thing is, if the judge needs to intervene and ask a question about the personal circumstances of your client who might be an offender, say in a plea of mitigation, then you haven't prepared. Similarly, in a civil matter, if the judge needs to intervene and ask for the factual circumstances of the case, then you haven't prepared. Now this is obviously unavoidable, obviously, because judges are smarter than us and they will invariably find things to ask. But if you can try to cover your bases before you go in, that's key. And the second thing is, if your judge asks you what your client is seeking during or at the end of your case, then you haven't applied the principle of primacy. And primacy is where you channel all of your efforts into one case theory throughout there. So you don't need to cross-examine on everything or for the sake of cross-examining, because that does, in my opinion, dilute your case.
Again, students who are watching this, not sure which way their career path's going to go, but may well be intimidated by the prospect of going to the bar. Surely in your job as a judge's associate, you've seen advocates come and go. You must have seen some duds. You've obviously seen some good ones. I mean, our students shouldn't be intimidated, should they, by the prospect of going to the bar, based on what you've seen?
Absolutely not. So the bar readers course has recently introduced an exam. Prior to that, it was simply a matter of putting your name down and eventually you're called to the bar, and that meant that anyone could go to the bar. And what students might find if they want to try it is, if they do go and sit in court and just watch any case that they might find, they will notice that counsel, sometimes they'll walk out of the case thinking, I can do a better job than that. And it comes down to how passionate you are about your case and about the area of law that you're advocating for. And I find that in my experience in particular, the more passionate you are about something, the more natural it becomes.
Okay, last question, Sepi. If you had to give one or two pieces of advice to our law students, budding lawyers watching this, what would those bits of advice be?
I would certainly advise to think about how to differentiate yourself beyond having a law degree, beyond having a sound knowledge of the legal system, beyond having a sound knowledge of the law. And the reason for this is because you're also being responsive to today's day and age. So for instance, in my experience, when I was at the Western Community Legal Centre, what actually got me through the door was my Farsi speaking background, and that part of me was actually what got me through the door to be able to communicate to Farsi-speaking migrants and refugees, and also to be culturally sensitive to that part of the community. But whilst that got me through the door, I ended up where I really wanted to be, which was in litigation and advocacy for a very minor subset of the community that weren't Farsi-speaking. So to that end, and because that remains the most rewarding part of my career, was helping that disadvantaged subset of the community, I would recommend to certainly think of other ways you can push yourself forward, such as different languages, what your passions are. And my second piece of advice is to find a mentor that mirrors your values. Find a mentor that mirrors your vision. and find a mentor that inspires you and that you can aspire to be like. I can't stress how important that is as well.
Okay, students, there's some great advice. First of all, don't be intimidated. There are some good advocates out there. There are some that I have no doubt you are much better than. Sepi also said that judges are mostly smarter than us. Some are. I can give you that advice. Some aren't. But also try and differentiate yourself. Get as much practical experience as you can. You're going to make it and you're going to enjoy it.